They laughed at the elderly woman the moment she stepped through the grand ballroom doors. But before the night was over, some of the most influential people in the city would discover that they had just mocked the one person who made their celebration possible. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments below. And if you believe respect should never depend on appearance, be sure to like and subscribe. Stories like this remind us why dignity still matters. Now, back to the story. The crystal hall shimmered beneath towering chandeliers, their golden light reflecting off polished marble floors and rows of elegant tables dressed in white linen. More than 300 guests filled the room, their conversations blending into a pleasant hum of success, wealth, and self-importance. Men in tailored tuxedos adjusted their cufflinks, while women in designer gowns exchanged practice smiles. It was the annual Heritage Foundation Gala, one of the most prestigious charity events in the state, attended by business leaders, politicians, and prominent social figures. Cameras flashed near the entrance as guests arrived, each eager to be seen. Then the glass doors opened quietly, and an elderly woman stepped inside. At first, nobody paid much attention. She was small, perhaps in her late 70s, with silver hair neatly pinned behind her head. Her light blue coat looked decades old, but carefully maintained. Comfortable walking shoes peeked from beneath a modest skirt. A worn leather handbag rested gently against her side. There was nothing about her appearance that seemed remarkable among the luxury surrounding her. In fact, she looked completely out of place. The young hostess at the registration desk noticed her first. The smile on her face faded ever so slightly. She glanced at the guest list before looking back at the woman. Nearby, a pair of wealthy donors exchanged curious looks. One whispered something to the other, prompting a restrained laugh. The elderly woman seemed not to notice. Her eyes moved slowly around the ballroom, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the stage, the banners, and the hundreds of people enjoying the evening. Something about the way she looked at the room felt different. Not impressed, not intimidated, almost familiar, as though she had seen it all before. Yet nobody recognized her. Nobody approached her. Nobody offered a welcome. Across the room, several guests continued watching with growing amusement. One woman in an emerald gown tilted her head and quietly asked, "Do you think she wandered in from another event?" Her husband smirked. "Either that or she's completely lost." A few people chuckled. The elderly woman simply continued standing near the entrance, her hands folded gently over her handbag. Her expression remained calm, her eyes steady. The room carried on around her, unaware that the story they believed they were witnessing was not the real story at all. Because while everyone saw an elderly woman who appeared ordinary, there was something they did not know. Something hidden beneath the quiet smile and modest clothing. And before this evening ended, every person in that ballroom would wish they had treated her differently. The elderly woman finally approached the registration desk, moving with the careful confidence of someone who had long ago stopped rushing for anyone. The young hostess straightened her posture and forced a professional smile, though the uncertainty in her eyes remained. "Good evening, ma'am. May I help you?" she asked. The woman returned a gentle smile. "Yes, dear. I am here for the gala." The hostess glanced down at the tablet in front of her. "Of course. Your name, please." "Evelyn Harper," the woman answered calmly. The hostess searched the guest list. Her finger moved down the screen once, then twice. Her smile began to fade. "I am sorry. I do not see your name here." Evelyn did not appear concerned. "Perhaps it is under a different category." The hostess checked again. Nothing. A few nearby guests had already started paying attention. The woman in the emerald gown nudged her husband. "I knew it," she whispered. "She does not belong here." Her husband chuckled quietly. The hostess cleared her throat. "Ma'am, this is a private invitation-only event." Evelyn nodded politely. "Yes, I understand. Do you have your invitation?" the hostess asked. Evelyn opened her handbag and searched carefully. Inside were reading glasses, a small notebook, a handkerchief, and several folded papers. No invitation appeared. The pause stretched longer than anyone expected. Behind Evelyn, a line of arriving guests had begun to form. Impatient glances were exchanged. A tall man in a black tuxedo stepped forward from the crowd. His name was Gregory Stanton, one of the foundation's major donors and a familiar face at every gala. "Is there a problem?" he asked. The hostess hesitated. This lady cannot locate her invitation. Gregory looked Evelyn up and down. The judgment arrived instantly. Perhaps there has been some confusion, he said with a smile that felt more dismissive than kind. This event is specifically for donors, board members, and invited guests. Evelyn met his gaze. I know what the event is. Something about her calm response irritated him. He was accustomed to people becoming nervous around wealth and status. She seemed entirely unaffected. Then perhaps someone should escort you to the public information desk downstairs, Gregory suggested. Several nearby guests smiled. A few laughed quietly into their champagne glasses. Evelyn remained composed. Her eyes drifted toward a large banner hanging above the ballroom stage. Gold lettering celebrated the Heritage Foundation's 50th anniversary. She studied it for a moment, almost as if she were remembering something. Gregory followed her gaze and shook his head. Quite an achievement, is it not? He said proudly. 50 years of changing lives. Evelyn nodded softly. Yes, it certainly is. The answer was simple, yet something about it felt strangely personal. The hostess noticed it too, but could not explain why. Just then another guest arrived carrying a crystal award shaped like an open book. He handed it to a staff member preparing the stage display. As the award passed through the light, Evelyn's eyes lingered on it. For the briefest moment, a faint smile touched her face. Not admiration. Recognition. The kind of smile someone gives an old photograph. Nobody noticed except the hostess. And as laughter quietly continued around her, Evelyn Harper stood peacefully in the center of a room, filled with people who believed they understood exactly who she was. They could not have been more mistaken. The atmosphere around the registration desk continued to shift as more guests slowed their pace, sensing entertainment where there should have been none. Gregory Stanton folded his arms and glanced at the growing line behind Evelyn. I think we have delayed this long enough, he said. The staff has been more than patient. The hostess looked uncomfortable. She had been trained to solve problems discreetly, not create scenes. Yet the attention of so many influential guests made her nervous. Perhaps if you could provide another form of identification, she offered carefully. Evelyn reached into her handbag once more and removed a worn leather wallet. Inside was a driver's license, several old photographs, and a membership card so faded that the printing had nearly disappeared. The hostess examined it briefly before shaking her head. I am sorry, ma'am. This does not help me verify your invitation. A few nearby guests exchanged amused smiles. One man quietly remarked that the card looked older than some of the people attending the gala. More laughter followed. Evelyn simply placed the card back into her wallet. There was no frustration in her face. No embarrassment. If anything, she seemed saddened by something entirely unrelated to the conversation taking place around her. Her gaze drifted toward a display near the ballroom entrance. Framed photographs chronicled the foundation's history over 5 decades. Images of groundbreaking ceremonies, scholarship recipients, volunteers, and community leaders lined the wall. Most guests walked past them without a second glance. Evelyn studied them carefully. Her eyes paused on one photograph longer than the others. A black and white image taken many years ago. The hostess noticed. Were you looking for someone? She asked politely. Evelyn smiled. Just remembering. Before the hostess could respond, a sharply dressed woman approached from across the ballroom. Her name was Vanessa Brooks, chair of the gala planning committee. She had spent months organizing the evening and had little patience for disruptions. What seems to be the issue? She asked. Gregory answered before anyone else could speak. Apparently our guest cannot locate an invitation. Vanessa's eyes moved immediately to Evelyn's coat, shoes, and handbag. The conclusion formed almost instantly. This event is private, she said firmly. We cannot allow unregistered individuals to enter. Evelyn nodded. I understand your responsibility. The response caught Vanessa slightly off guard. Most people argued. Most people became defensive. Evelyn remained calm. Then perhaps you would be willing to wait in the lobby while we sort this out, Vanessa suggested. The words sounded polite, but everyone understood their meaning. Several guests nearby seemed satisfied. The problem was being removed. The evening could continue. Yet as Evelyn glanced once more toward the historical display, something unusual happened. An elderly janitor arranging chairs near the back of the room suddenly stopped what he was doing. His eyes fixed on Evelyn. For several seconds he simply stared. Then confusion crossed his face, followed by disbelief. He took a cautious step forward, studying her more closely. His hands began to tremble slightly. Meanwhile, nobody else noticed. Gregory was already returning to his table. Vanessa was speaking with staff. The guests resumed their conversations. They believed the matter was finished. They believed they had correctly identified the stranger standing among them. But in another corner of the ballroom, one man was beginning to realize a truth that would soon change the entire evening. The elderly janitor stood frozen beside a stack of banquet chairs, his eyes never leaving Evelyn Harper. For nearly 30 years, he had worked at events hosted by the Heritage Foundation. He had seen governors, celebrities, and philanthropists pass through those doors. Yet the moment he saw the elderly woman standing near the registration desk, a memory buried deep within him suddenly resurfaced. Slowly he removed his glasses and looked again. It could not be. And yet the more he studied her face, the more certain he became. Meanwhile, Evelyn seemed completely unaware of the growing realization taking place across the room. Vanessa Brooks was already signaling for a staff member to escort her toward the lobby. "This will only take a few minutes," Vanessa said. "We simply need to verify a few things." Evelyn nodded politely. Of course. There was no anger in her voice. No frustration. That calmness only made some guests more dismissive. To them, she looked like someone accustomed to being overlooked. Gregory Stanton had returned to a nearby table where several donors were discussing the evening's fundraising goals. One of them glanced toward Evelyn and laughed softly. "Imagine showing up to an event like this without an invitation." Gregory smiled. Some people enjoy attention. Across the ballroom, the janitor finally gathered the courage to move. He walked slowly toward the historical display lining the wall. His eyes scanned the framed photographs one by one until he reached a faded black-and-white image near the center. The photograph showed a small group of people standing in front of a modest brick building decades earlier. Most guests never stopped long enough to notice it. But the janitor knew exactly what he was looking for. His breathing quickened. Then he turned back toward Evelyn. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same eyes, the same smile, the same presence. He whispered something under his breath before hurrying toward a senior staff member stationed near the stage. The staff member frowned as the janitor spoke urgently. At first he appeared skeptical. Then the janitor pointed toward the photograph. The staff member walked over and examined it carefully. His expression changed almost immediately. He looked from the image to Evelyn and back again. A strange silence settled over him. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued observing the ballroom. Her eyes lingered on the stage where a massive golden banner celebrated 50 years of service. She remembered when there had been no stage, no chandeliers, no luxury ballroom, no wealthy donors. Only a handful of folding chairs in a rented church basement and a dream that seemed impossible at the time. A faint smile touched her face before fading once more. Around her, conversations continued. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter echoed. Nobody noticed that several members of the foundation staff had suddenly become distracted. One after another, they were being quietly directed toward the historical display. Each reaction followed the same pattern. Curiosity, confusion, then disbelief. Yet no one spoke openly. Not yet. It was as if an invisible current was beginning to move beneath the surface of the evening. Vanessa was still preparing to escort Evelyn away when she noticed two staff members staring toward the elderly woman. Their faces had gone pale. "What is going on?" she asked. Neither answered immediately. One simply pointed toward the old photograph on the wall. Vanessa followed his gesture. She glanced at the image. Then she looked back at Evelyn. For the first time all evening, uncertainty appeared in her eyes. The room still believed it understood exactly who Evelyn Harper was. But that certainty was beginning to crack. And within minutes, the truth hidden behind 50 years of forgotten history would start finding its way back into the light. Vanessa Brooks felt a chill run through her as she stared at the faded photograph. The image had hung in the Foundation's archives for years, largely ignored by modern donors who preferred stories about growth, expansion, and prestige. Yet now, standing only a few feet away from the elderly woman, she could not ignore what she was seeing. The young woman in the photograph and Evelyn Harper shared the same unmistakable eyes, the same gentle smile, the same quiet confidence. Vanessa quickly turned the frame over and read the brass plaque beneath it. Her breath caught. The plaque identified the individuals who had attended the Foundation's very first meeting 50 years earlier. At the center of the group stood a young schoolteacher named Evelyn Harper. Vanessa read the name twice to make certain. Around her, several staff members had gathered. One of them hurried away toward the administrative office while another began searching old digital records on a tablet. Within moments, expressions of disbelief spread from face to face. Meanwhile, Evelyn remained completely unaware of the growing panic. She continued looking around the ballroom as if revisiting memories nobody else could see. The grand chandeliers reflected in her eyes. The elegant decorations. The polished stage. None of it existed when she first dreamed of helping struggling children decades ago. Back then, she had worked 2 jobs while organizing after-school tutoring programs in church basements and community centers. There had been no wealthy donors, no corporate sponsorships, no media attention, only determination. As staff members quietly investigated, pieces of a forgotten history began emerging. Archived documents listed Evelyn Harper as the foundation's original founder. Handwritten letters carried her signature. Early fundraising records showed she had personally donated nearly everything she owned to keep the organization alive during its first difficult years. One staff member uncovered a scanned newspaper article from decades earlier describing how a young teacher named Evelyn Harper had launched an educational initiative that eventually became the Heritage Foundation. The room itself stood as proof of what she had started. Yet few people in the organization's current leadership even knew her name. Over time, new executives had arrived. New boards had taken control. New generations had inherited the success. The founder slowly became a footnote, then a photograph, then almost nothing at all. Across the ballroom, Gregory Stanton continued chatting with donors, completely unaware of the storm gathering behind him. He laughed as he described future fundraising goals and expansion projects. Nearby guests sipped champagne and admired the evening's decorations. None of them realized that the woman they had dismissed was not a stranger to the foundation. She was its beginning. Suddenly, the foundation's executive director, Michael Reynolds, emerged from a side corridor holding a thick archival binder. His face had gone pale. He flipped through several pages before stopping abruptly. There, preserved beneath protective plastic, was a document signed 50 years earlier. At the bottom appeared a familiar name, Evelyn Harper. Michael looked up slowly. His eyes found the elderly woman standing quietly near the entrance. For several seconds he could not move. Then he whispered words that would soon change everything. "My God," he said softly. "She did not come here because she belongs to the foundation. She came here because without her, there would be no foundation at all." For a moment, Michael Reynolds simply stood there holding the archival binder against his chest. The sounds of the gala seemed to fade into the background as 50 years of forgotten history suddenly became impossible to ignore. Around him, staff members exchanged stunned looks. One woman quietly covered her mouth. Another stared at Evelyn as though she were looking at a living piece of history. Michael lowered his eyes to the documents once more. There was no doubt. Every record pointed to the same truth. The Heritage Foundation had not been built by wealthy executives or celebrated donors. It had begun with a young schoolteacher who believed struggling children deserved opportunities that nobody else was willing to provide. That schoolteacher was standing only 30 feet away. Across the ballroom, Evelyn remained near the entrance. She had noticed the unusual attention, but said nothing. Her expression remained calm as she watched guests enjoying the evening she had unknowingly helped create decades earlier. Michael finally took a step forward. Then another. Several staff members followed behind him. Vanessa Brooks noticed the movement immediately. "Michael," she called. "What is happening?" He stopped and looked directly at her. The emotion in his face made her stomach tighten. "Do you know who she is?" he asked quietly. Vanessa hesitated. Michael opened the binder and showed her one of the original founding documents. Her eyes moved across the page, then widened. She looked toward Evelyn, then back at the signature. The color drained from her face. "No," she whispered. "That cannot be." "It is," Michael replied. "Every record confirms it." Vanessa suddenly remembered the way Evelyn had studied the old photographs, the way she had looked at the ballroom, the way she had spoken about the foundation's anniversary. None of it had been curiosity. It had been memory. A growing sense of unease spread through the nearby staff members. Word began traveling quietly from person to person. A board member overheard part of the conversation and approached. Then another. Within minutes, several senior leaders were staring toward the entrance with expressions of disbelief. Meanwhile, Gregory Stanton continued speaking with donors, completely unaware that the room's attention was slowly shifting away from him. One donor noticed the gathering near Michael and asked what was happening. Another followed his gaze. Then another. The invisible current moving beneath the gala was becoming impossible to ignore. Finally, Michael closed the binder and took a deep breath. "We need to correct this immediately," he said. Nobody argued. Nobody hesitated. For the first time that evening, the people responsible for running the foundation realized they had made a terrible mistake. Not because an important guest had been inconvenienced. Not because someone influential had been offended. But because they had failed to recognize the very person whose vision had made all of their success possible. As Michael began walking toward Evelyn, conversations around the ballroom gradually softened. Guests noticed the unusual procession forming behind him. Heads turned. Curiosity spread. And standing quietly beneath the golden glow of the chandeliers, Evelyn Harper watched them approach with the same gentle expression she had carried all evening, as though she already knew exactly what was about to happen. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath as Michael Reynolds crossed the marble floor. Conversations faded one table at a time. Guests lowered their glasses. Musicians near the stage stopped speaking among themselves. Something important was happening, and nobody understood why. Gregory Stanton noticed the unusual silence and turned toward the entrance. His confident smile slowly disappeared as he watched the executive director approach the elderly woman with a level of respect he had never seen before. Behind Michael stood board members, senior staff, and committee leaders. Vanessa Brooks followed several steps behind, her expression filled with disbelief and regret. When Michael finally reached Evelyn, he stopped and looked at her for a long moment. The room became completely still. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, he extended both hands and said quietly, "Mrs. Harper, I owe you an apology." A hush fell across the ballroom. Evelyn smiled gently. "There is no need for that, Michael." Hearing her speak his name caused several board members to exchange stunned glances. Michael swallowed hard. "There is every reason. We should have recognized you the moment you arrived." Nearby guests looked at one another in confusion. Gregory felt a knot form in his stomach. For the first time all evening, uncertainty replaced certainty. Michael turned toward the crowd. His voice carried clearly through the silent ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, before tonight's program continues, there is someone you need to meet." Hundreds of eyes fixed on Evelyn. Some guests leaned forward in their seats. Others stood. Michael opened the archival binder and lifted one of the protected documents for everyone to see. For 50 years, this organization has changed lives across the country. We celebrate scholarships, community programs, and opportunities created for thousands of families. Tonight, we celebrate our history. But there is something many of us forgot. The silence deepened. Michael looked directly at Evelyn. The Heritage Foundation did not begin in this ballroom. It did not begin with corporate sponsorships, wealthy donors, or successful fundraising campaigns. He paused. It began with a young schoolteacher who believed every child deserved a chance. A murmur moved through the crowd. Gregory's face lost color. Vanessa lowered her eyes. Michael continued. "The woman standing before you is Evelyn Harper. She founded this organization 50 years ago." The room went silent. Truly silent. A champagne glass nearly slipped from someone's hand. Several guests stared in disbelief. Others looked toward the historical photographs lining the wall and suddenly understood. The resemblance was undeniable. The founder, the visionary, the person whose idea had grown into a nationally respected institution. She had been standing among them the entire evening. Gregory felt his heart sink as memories of his earlier comments returned. Around him, other guests looked equally uncomfortable. The laughter from earlier now felt impossible to explain. Evelyn stood quietly beneath the chandelier light, while realization spread through the room like a wave. She had not come as a guest seeking entry. She had not come looking for recognition. She had come to witness what had become of a dream she started half a century earlier. And at that moment, everyone in the ballroom finally understood who she really was. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The revelation settled over the ballroom with the weight of something far greater than embarrassment. It was the realization that they had judged a woman before learning her story. Gregory Stanton stood frozen near his table. The confidence that had defined him throughout the evening was gone. Around him, other donors avoided eye contact. The laughter that had seemed harmless only minutes earlier now echoed in their memories with uncomfortable clarity. Vanessa Brooks felt her face grow warm. She replayed every word she had spoken near the registration desk. Every assumption, every dismissal. She had spent months planning a celebration honoring the Foundation's legacy, yet she had nearly escorted that legacy out of the building. Michael Reynolds slowly stepped aside, allowing everyone an unobstructed view of Evelyn. Hundreds of eyes remained fixed on her, yet the elderly woman appeared completely unchanged. She was not standing taller. She was not enjoying the attention. She was not seeking vindication. She looked exactly as she had when she first walked through the doors. Calm, humble, quiet. That simple dignity made the moment even more powerful. A board member finally broke the silence. "Mrs. Harper," he said softly, "we owe everything to your vision." Evelyn smiled gently. "No," she replied. "You owe everything to the children who inspired it." Her answer only deepened the silence. Across the ballroom, guests exchanged looks of disbelief. They had expected pride. They had expected recognition. Instead, they found humility. One by one, people began, standing from their seats. Not because they were instructed to, not because protocol demanded it, because something inside them told them it was the right thing to do. Soon dozens were standing, then hundreds. The sound of chairs moving across the floor filled the room. A standing ovation began to spread throughout the ballroom. Evelyn looked around in surprise. Her eyes softened. For a brief moment, emotion appeared behind her steady composure. Near the front of the room, the elderly janitor who had first recognized her quietly applauded with tears in his eyes. He remembered the stories older employees used to tell about the young teacher who refused to give up when funding disappeared and support was scarce. Many of those stories had been forgotten. Tonight, they were returning. Gregory finally stepped forward. His expression carried genuine regret. "Mrs. Harper," he said, his voice unsteady, "I treated you unfairly. I judged you before I knew anything about you. I am deeply sorry." The ballroom became silent once more. Everyone waited for her response. Evelyn looked at him kindly. There was no anger in her eyes. No desire to embarrass him. "Thank you," she said softly. "That takes courage to admit." Gregory lowered his head. Around him, several others seemed equally humbled. The lesson had become impossible to ignore. Wolf had not revealed character that evening. Titles had not revealed character. Status had not revealed character. Character had been revealed by the woman everyone had overlooked. Beneath the golden chandeliers, surrounded by people who finally understood what they had failed to see, Evelyn Harper stood as a reminder that greatness rarely announces itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, carrying a worn handbag, waiting patiently to see whether people will recognize the value of a person before learning their importance. As the applause gradually faded, a different atmosphere settled over the ballroom. The tension, embarrassment, and disbelief that had dominated the evening gave way to something quieter. Reflection. People were no longer looking at Evelyn Harper as a founder, a historical figure, or the woman whose name appeared in old documents. They were looking at her as a person. Michael Reynolds invited her to the stage, but Evelyn gently declined. "I have spent enough years standing in front of people," she said with a warm smile. "Tonight belongs to those continuing the work." The response only increased the respect filling the room. For decades, she had built opportunities for others. Even now, she was directing attention away from herself. Michael nodded and understood. Instead of bringing her to the stage, he brought the stage to her. A microphone was quietly carried to the entrance area where she stood. The gesture drew smiles throughout the ballroom. Evelyn accepted the microphone and looked around the room. The faces staring back at her were very different from the faces she had first encountered when she arrived. Earlier there had been judgment. Now there was humility. Earlier there had been assumptions. Now there was understanding. She paused for a moment before speaking. 50 years ago, she began softly, there were only 6 people sitting in a church basement with a simple idea. We believed that one opportunity could change a child's future. The room listened carefully. At the time, nobody thought we would succeed. We did not have money. We did not have influence. We only had faith in what was possible. Several guests lowered their eyes. Her words carried more weight than any speech they had heard all evening. "What matters most," she continued, "is not who receives credit. What matters is whether lives are changed." Her gaze moved gently across the crowd. "And judging by what I have seen tonight, Many lives have been changed. A smile spread through the room. Some people wiped away tears. Others simply stood quietly, absorbing every word. Then Evelyn said something nobody expected. "I am grateful for what happened this evening." Confused expressions appeared throughout the audience. Gregory Stanton looked particularly surprised. Evelyn smiled. "Because sometimes we learn the most important lessons in uncomfortable moments." The room became silent once more. Every person you meet is carrying a story you cannot see. A title cannot tell you that story. A bank account cannot tell you that story. Clothing cannot tell you that story. The only way to discover it is through kindness. No one moved. No one looked away. Her words landed with a power that required no dramatic ending. After returning the microphone, Evelyn thanked the staff, shook hands with the janitor who had recognized her, and spoke briefly with several scholarship recipients. Then, just as quietly as she had arrived, she picked up her worn handbag and made her way toward the exit. This time, however, nobody ignored her. Guests stepped aside respectfully. Staff members smiled. Board members thanked her. Even Gregory stood near the doorway and offered a sincere farewell. Evelyn smiled and wished him well. Then she walked into the evening air beyond the ballroom doors. Long after she was gone, many people remained standing where they were, thinking about the lesson they had almost missed. And that night, beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers and surrounded by the success her vision had created, everyone remembered something far more valuable than wealth, status, or recognition. They remembered what dignity looks like.